like to start by sharing a couple of quotes. After your death, you will be what you were before your birth. And death is but a transition from this life to another existence where there is no more pain and anguish. All the bitterness and disagreements will vanish, and the only thing that lives forever is love. Or my view of the afterlife is that it's made of different levels depending on how spiritual a life we live. And that's from John Edward. People think of life as being so sacred, and they feel that it's their only chance, and they have to do something with their life and have an impact. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a pit stop for the afterlife. Just a little test to see how you can handle reality. And that is Kurt Cobain. Yeah. Let us pray. Father, Mother God, we are so grateful to be living in a place and time with so much potential. We are grateful for your constant and loving presence in our lives. And we ask now that our guides, angels, and loved ones in spirit gather closely with us. And we celebrate that by repeating the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Should we even try the music? Let's not. Let's just not even try the music. Because Charlie's going to have to dance between the microphones in a setting and stuff, and it's just, we're just going to skip the music.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
We'll do it later with the messages.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that
Don't
means
make
off
us
again.
sing our song.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys don't deserve that punishment.
Oh my.
Is that a preview? Just kidding.
So I'd like to start with a little refresher about what I talked about last week, and then today we'll move on to a little more. We were talking about what our lovely ancestors might be experiencing while they are in spirit, as we call it. The source for this information comes primarily from two books by Dr. Michael Newton, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, and I highly recommend both of them. Dr. Newton was a hypnotherapist who spent the majority of his career specializing in taking his clients through a review of that period that we call between lives. His sessions spanned more than 40 years, and he called them life between lives sessions. Each session with a client would last around 4 to 7 hours. They were very detailed, and it's fascinating. Lots of case studies in those books. Last week, we touched on what most of Dr. Newton's clients experienced as they made the transition across the veil. We talked about a tunnel of light with various layers, which were perhaps astral planes. We spoke of what these souls encountered once they traveled through the tunnel. No one arrives on the other side alone. Everyone is greeted by guides and loved ones who attend to whatever healing might be required on the soul level. We also talked about those souls who Dr. Newton just called disturbed souls, or those who have been involved with evil acts. There are mentally ill people who feel driven by opposing forces of good and evil over what they believe they have no control. The destructive impulses of emotional disorders, if left untreated, inhibit soul development. Certain souls do undergo separation in the spirit world, and this happens at the time of their orientation with the guides. They are not activated along the same travel routes as other souls. Those who've been impeded by evil report that souls whose influence was too weak to turn aside a human impulse to harm others will go into seclusion upon re-entering the spirit world. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? They were too weak to turn aside a human impulse to do harm to others. These souls don't appear to mix with other entities in the conventional manner for quite a while. And now we're up to where I'd like to begin today's talk. Our intrepid spirit entities have now gone through the tunnel, had a brief meeting and assessment with their guides and loved ones, and now enter what Dr. Newton calls the orientation or holding area. After those entities who meet us during our homecoming have dispersed, we're ready to be taken to a space of healing. This will be followed by another stop involving the soul's reorientation to a spiritual environment. In this place, we are often examined by our guide. Dr. Newton thinks of the healing station as a field hospital or a MASH unit for damaged souls coming off of Earth's battlefield. People in hypnosis who discuss this type of counseling, which goes on during orientation, say their guides are gentle but probing. Imagine your favorite elementary school teacher, and you have the idea. Think of a firm but concerned entity who knows all about your learning habits, your strong and weak points, and your fears, and who's always ready to work with you as long as you continue to try. When you don't, everything remains stationary in your development. Nothing can be hidden by the students from their spiritual teachers. No subterfuge or deception exists in a telepathic world. There are a multitude of differences in orientation scenes depending upon the soul's individual makeup and their state of mind just after their life ends. Souls report their orientation often takes place in a room. The furnishings of these settings and the intensity of their first conference can vary after each life. Regardless of the specific energy treatment received by the soul at the gateway to the spirit world, most all returning souls will continue on to some sort of healing station before finally rejoining their groups. All but the most advanced souls crossing back into the spirit world are met by benevolent spirits who make contact with their positive energy and escort needing souls to quiet recovery areas. That just sounds so nice to me. Most recovery areas for the returning soul involve some kind of orientation back to the spirit world. It may be intense or moderate in scope, depending on the condition of the soul. This usually includes a preliminary debriefing of the life just completed. Much more in-depth counseling will take place later with guides in group conferences and with our council of elders. The surroundings of recovery areas are identifiable earthly settings created out of our memories and what our guides feel will promote healing. Orientation environments are not the same after each of our lives. There are certain displaced souls who have become so contaminated by their host bodies that they require special handling. In life, they became destructive to others and themselves. This spectrum of behavior would primarily include souls who have been associated with evil acts that caused harm to other people through deliberate intent. Understand that deliberate intent portion. There are souls who slowly become more contaminated from a series of lifetimes, while others are totally overcome by one body alone. In either case, these souls are taken to places of isolation where their energy undergoes a more radical treatment plan than the typical returning soul. Contamination of the soul can take many forms and involve different grades of severity during an incarnation. A difficult host body might cause the less experienced soul to return with damaged energy, or a more advanced soul being would survive the same situation relatively intact. The average soul's energy will become shadowed when it has lived within a host body obsessed by constant fear and rage. Our thoughts, feelings, moods, and attitudes are mediated by body chemicals which are released through signals of perceived threats and anger from the brain. Fight or flight mechanisms come from our primitive brain, not from the soul. The soul has a great capacity to control our biological and emotional reactions to life. but many souls are unable to regulate a dysfunctional brain. Souls display these scars when they leave a body that has deteriorated in this fashion. One of the red flags for souls who are losing their capacity to regular deviant human beings is when they have had a series of lives in bodies demonstrating a lack of intimacy and displaying tendencies toward violence. This has a domino effect, with the soul asking for the same sort of body to overcome the last one. Because we have free will, our guides are indulgent. A soul is not excused from responsibility for a disturbed human mind when it is unable to regulate it because it is part of that mind. The problem for slow learner souls is that they may have had a series of prior life struggles before occupying a body that escalated wrongdoing to a new level of evil. What happens to these disturbed souls when they return to the spirit world? I'll begin with a quote from a client giving an outsider's view of a place where severely damaged souls are taken. Some of the subjects call this area the City of Shadows. It is here where negative energy is erased. Since this is the place where so many souls are concentrated who have negative energy, it's dark to those of us outside. We can't go into this place where souls who have been associated with horror are undergoing alteration. And we would not want to go there anyway. It is a place of healing, but from a distance it has the appearance of a dark sea, while I'm looking at it from a high sandy beach. All the light around this area in contrast, because positive energy defines the greater goodness of bright light. When you look at the darkness carefully, you see it's not totally black, but a mixture of deep green. We know this is an aspect of the combined forces of the healers working here. We also know that souls who are taken to this area are not exonerated. Eventually, in some way, they must redress the wrongs they perpetuated on others. This they must do to restore full positive energy to themselves. Subjects who are familiar with damaged souls explain to me that not all of the more terrible memories of bad deeds are erased. It is known that if the soul did not retain some memory of an evil life, it would not be accountable. This knowledge by the soul is relevant for future decisions. Nevertheless, the resurrection of the soul in the spirit world is merciful. The soul mind does not fully retain all the lurid details of harming others in former host bodies after treatment. If this were not true, the guilt and association with such lives would be so overpowering to the soul, they might refuse to reincarnate again to redress these wrongs. These souls would lack the confidence to ever dig themselves out of pits of despair. I understand there are souls whose acts in host bodies were so heinous they are not permitted to return to earth. Souls are strengthened by regeneration with the expectation they can keep future potentially malevolent bodies in check. Of course, once in our new body, the amnesiac blocks of certain past lives prevent us from being so inhibited we would not progress. That part gets a little heavy and dark, doesn't it? Though it's interesting to know what happens and maybe understand where some people's thoughts of hell come from. So let's talk about more uplifting topics. Let's talk about soul groups. Soul groups range from between 3 and 25 members, with the average having about 15. There are times when souls from nearby cluster groups may want to connect with each other. Often this activity involves older souls who have made many friends from other groups with whom they've been associated over a couple hundred past lives. How a subject views their group cluster setting is based on the soul's state of advancement. Although memories of a schoolroom atmosphere are always very clear, in the spirit world, educational placement depends on the level of soul development. Simply because a soul has been incarnating on Earth since the Stone Age is no guarantee of high attainment. Dr. Newton often remarks about a client who took 4,000 years of past lives to finally conquer jealousy. I can report he is not a jealous person today, yet he has made little progress with fighting his own intolerance. It takes some students longer to get through certain lessons, just as in earthly classrooms. On the other hand, all highly advanced souls are old souls, both in terms of knowledge and experience. One really interesting aspect of this research has been the discovery of energy colors displayed by souls in the spirit world. These colors relate to a soul's state of advancement. And this information, gathered slowly over many years, has been one indicator of progress during client assessments, and also serves to identify other souls my subjects see around them while in a trance state. Typically, pure white denotes a younger soul, and with advancement, soul energy becomes more dense, moving into orange, yellow, green, and finally the blue ranges. In addition to these center core auras, there are subtle mixtures of halo colors within every group that relate to the character aspects of each soul. While in a superconscious state during deep hypnosis, clients say that in the spirit world, no soul is looked down upon as having less value than any other soul. We are all in a process of transformation to something greater than our current state of enlightenment. Each of us is considered uniquely qualified to make some contribution toward the whole, no matter how hard we're struggling with our lessons. If this was not true, we would not have been created in the first place. And the final transit inward is especially important for the younger souls. One client on awakening described this scene as giving him the sense he was arriving back home at twilight after a long trip away. Having passed from the countryside into his town, he finally reached the proper street. The front windows of his neighbors' houses were lit, and he could see people inside as he slowly drove past, reaching the driveway of his own home. Although people in trance may use such words as clumps and hives to describe how their home spaces look from a distance, this view becomes more individualistic once they go into each cluster. Then the subject's spiritual surroundings are associated with towns, schools, and other living areas identified with earthly landmarks of security and pleasure. Dr. Newton has been asked many times if his subjects see the source of creation during their sessions. His explanation is that he can only go so far upriver toward the source because of the limitations of working with people who are still incarnating. Advanced subjects talk about the time of conjunction when they will all join the most sacred ones. In this sphere of dense purple light, there is an all-knowing presence. One subject says, "What all this means I cannot say, but I do know a presence is felt when we go before our council of elders. Once or twice between our lives we visit this group of higher beings who are a step or two above our guides." Souls consider themselves having finally arrived home when they rejoin familiar classmates in group settings. I like that word, classmates. Their attendance here with certain other souls does resemble an educational placement system in form and function. The criteria for group admission is based upon knowledge and a given developmental level. As in any classroom situation, some students connect well with teachers and others less so. Group placement is determined by soul level. After physical death, a soul's journey back home ends with debarkation into the space reserved for their own colony, as long as they are not a very young soul or isolated for other reasons. The souls represented in these cluster groups are intimate old friends who have about the same awareness level. Not long after souls return to their spirit groups, they are called before a gathering of wise beings. A step or two above our guides, these ascended masters are the most advanced identifiable entities my still incarnating clients see in the spirit world. They give them different names, such as the Old Ones, the Sacred Masters, the Venerables, pragmatic titles like the Examiners or the Committee. The two most common names heard to describe these highly evolved masters are Council and Elders. Dr. Newton uses those designations. Because the Council of Elders does represent authority in the spirit world, there are people who become immediately suspicious when we talk about robed beings who wish to question souls about their past life performance. But rather than stages of punishment, we go through stages of self-enlightenment. Yet large segments of human society are unable to shake off that nagging feeling built over thousands of years of cultural conditioning that judgment and punishment must exist in some form in the afterlife as it does on earth. Maybe it won't be a hell with torture by the forces of darkness, but it is something unpleasant. It is Dr. Newton's hope that what he's shared will bring comfort to people inclined to be fearful about the possibility of punishment after death. On the other hand, there will be those who feel accountability to a council of elders may not be all that comfortable either. Those devoted solely to uninhibited pleasure in life while paying little attention to the plight of others might also be uncomfortable with the council. The spirit world is a place of order, and the council of elders exemplifies justice. They are not the ultimate source of divine authority, but they appear to represent the last station of beings responsible for souls incarnating on earth. These wise beings have great compassion for human weakness, and they demonstrate infinite patience with our faults. Thank God. We will be given many second chances in future lives. They won't be lives of easy karmic choice, otherwise we would learn nothing by coming back to Earth. However, the risks of life and sanity on this planet are not designed to cause us any further pain after death. Dr. Newton's subjects state they appear before their council right after an incarnation, and many report that they will visit a second time before they travel down to Earth for reincarnation. Of the two meetings, the first seems to have the most impact on the soul. During this meeting, the major choices we made in life are just reviewed with us. Behavior and accountability for our actions are important forks in our common path and are evaluated carefully. At the first conference, we are acutely aware of our mistakes, especially if we have hurt others. If there's to be a second visit as the time draws closer for reincarnation, it's more relaxed with discussions centering around potential life choices, opportunities, and expectations for the future. Excuse me. The description about the form and procedure of council meetings are very consistent among all hypnosis subjects. Here's an example of a typical response. The time of my expectation has arrived. I am to see the holy ones. My guide, Linnell, comes and escorts me from my cluster group down a long corridor past other classrooms. We move into another area with a larger hallway that's lined with marble columns. The walls are textured, which looks to be frosted glass panels of many colors. I hear soft choir music and string instruments. The light is a subdued golden tone. Everything is so relaxed, even sensual, and I am a little apprehensive. We come to an atrium filled with beautiful plants and a bubbling fountain of water. This is the waiting area. Excuse me. After a few moments, Linnell takes me into a round room with a high domed ceiling. There are rays of light shining down, and the holy ones are seated in a long, crescent-shaped table. I move to the center of the room in front of the table, while Linnell stands behind to my left. We're still standing, that's a good thing. time when souls are moving toward the space where their counsel is waiting, there are mixed reactions. Some subjects say they're looking forward to seeing the elders to get a higher perspective on their progress. Others are apprehensive, but this soon passes once the proceedings begin. The elders have a way of making the souls who come before them feel welcome almost at once. One of the most obvious differences between a courtroom on earth and a spiritual setting of Grand Masters is the fact that everyone in the chamber is telepathic. Thus, all in attendance know the whole truth about every aspect of our conduct and all the choices we made in the last life. Deception is impossible. There is no need for rules of evidence, defense attorneys, or juries. So they can properly plan for our future, the elders want to make sure that we totally understand the consequences of our actions, particularly towards others. That's one thing I've noticed reading through. Thank you. That's one thing I've noticed reading all these case studies is that all of the evaluations frequently focus on our actions toward others. They are less concerned with what you do to yourself than what you do to someone else. Kind of like Jesus, right? The elders ask how we feel about major episodes in our life and our courses of action. Desirable actions and those that are counterproductive are discussed openly with us without acrimony or finger pointing, regardless of the number of times we continue to make the same mistakes. Our council has enormous patience with us. We have much less patience with ourselves. Dr. Newton believes if the counsels of all the souls from earth were not so indulgent, the average soul would simply give up and not come back. Souls have this right of refusal to return to earth. There's a concept too. The elders probe for answers of how we think our host bodies serve or hinder development. Sorry. The council is already considering our next potential body and future environment. They wish to know how we feel about another incarnation. Many subjects have the sense that their council has not yet made up their minds about future lives for us. Our intent in life is of utmost importance at council meetings. The elders know all about us before we appear. How our souls and mind interface with the human brain is carefully analyzed. They know our past record with other host bodies. This includes the control or lack of it we exercised over the baser natures and negative emotions of bodies on earth. Compulsions, illusions, and attachments are never offered as excuses by souls for their conduct. That's not to say that souls don't sometimes complain about the difficulties in front of councils. However, rationalization about life's trials are not substituted for brutal honesty. The council is looking to see if the inner immortal character of our soul maintained its integrity in terms of values, ideals, and action during incarnation. They want to know if we were submerged within the host body, or did we shine through? Did our soul effectively merge as a partner to the human brain as one harmonious outward human personality? Council members question souls about the use of power. Was our influence positive or corrupted by the need to dominate others? Were we led by the convictions of others, demonstrating no personal power, or did we make our own original contributions? The council is not so concerned about how many times we fell down in our progress through life, but whether we have the courage to pick ourselves up and finish strong. Once souls have experienced this meeting with the council, they are free to pursue whatever activity interests them. This could include taking classes, creating beautiful things, or traveling. Each soul group generally seems to have similar interests, and so many groups progress through classes and other activities together. But each soul's options are unlimited. Some take classes to become guides, some continue to visit their families on Earth, and some, like my father and John Hurt, like to ride motorcycles great beyond. I thought that was interesting. We got a message one time. My father loved to ride his motorcycle. And so did John. And they never knew each other. They never met each other here on Earth. But I did have a message one Sunday that they were together on the other side because they bonded over motorcycles. The two of them came through with a message for me. It was very cool.
What is it, high rider or low rider or two different?
Yeah, I don't think either one of them were big on the low riders. As each soul progresses, they may choose to incarnate on Earth again. If they're interested in doing so, they will choose to meet with the council again, along with their guides, and make some plans. That discussion is for another sermon. If you all decide you would like to continue to hear more of this topic, let me know, and I will do a third sermon in this series about this sort of thing. But I'm really glad to be able to share all of this with you because I find it really
That's
fascinating.
really interesting.
Definitely
So.
interesting. I'd love to hear more.
Okay. Now it's time for meditation. Yeah, it kicked off.
Bug kicked on, but it's blowing into the window.
That's, oh yeah.
Probably not helping you.
The fan is helping, so.
Yeah.
It's not gonna stay there. That's right. And I don't have music.
Okay.
So as we join together to learn and grow and heal, we prepare ourselves by getting comfortable in our seats, letting our feet rest on the floor, letting our hands relax. We'll begin by taking a couple of deep breaths. Fill your lungs with this wonderful light love that pervades this place. And just when you breathe out, let go of whatever stress you're carrying. Just breathe in peace and light. And breathe out worries and anxieties. And the more you do so, the more you can continue to relax in your seat. Continue to breathe and relax. Feel your breath as it goes in and out. Bringing in the new, releasing the old. You are in a protected place right now, surrounded by all that is loving and good. And into this safe and loving place, you're invited to just relax. Maybe open just a little bit. Allow your heart to expand. Just imagine that light that lives in your heart area. Growing a little brighter with each breath that you take. And sending it out a little further loving light. Or you may hear them approach. You may just sense their presence as they come closer at your invitation. They will only come as close as you feel comfortable. And even if you can't sense their presence, know that they're there because you asked them to. While they are here, sharing this space with you, feel free to ask them any question you'd like about what their life is like, and any advice they might have for you. I'll give you a minute or two in silence to listen and feel their response. It's time to return to here and now, knowing that this guide is always with you. And you can always take a couple of moments to slow your mind, slow your breath, and make this connection with them. If they start stepping back from you now, as you can take a deep breath to remind yourself of this human body you're in. Another deep breath. Put your fingers and toes if you feel like it. And just allow your eyes to open whenever you feel